I'm Alan Robarge, a relationship coach. Welcome to Improve Your Relationships, where I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And on this video, let's talk about gaslighting. But in fact, I don't want to talk about it in some of the more traditional ways, which it is frequently referred to, which has to do with in the context of someone, another person, another partner, a parent, someone that you're in an unhealthy relationship with, usually an abusive relationship, and how gaslighting implies that there's a strategy and a way of thinking that a partner is doing something to you that's abusive. And it implies, or it very directly identifies, that these behaviors are manipulative and these behaviors are hurtful. And perhaps you already know, or just to identify, and forgive me for saying it like this because I'm quite aware that certain viewers have certain values around language and using colorful language, but I just think this is the best way to describe it. Gaslighting is when another person fucks with your reality. And I will acknowledge that I won't use that word again in this video, but I wanted to say that because it really captures, someone will deny something was said. The other person will give you feedback that your experience of what you observed is not what you observed. And this induces crazy making. So it's a tactic to disempower the other person's reality. And if you're in an abusive relationship, a dynamic with someone who is somehow, that's the skill set they have. You've chosen a partner that this is the best that they can do, and that they're so fear-based, they're so unable to be emotionally open, that they have resorted to these kind of abusive behaviors. That is really going to, that word again, your reality. So this video, however, is not similar to the many, many, many other videos that already exist about gaslighting and then focusing on the other person. The other person is sick. The other person is this. The other person has a personality disorder. Him, her, her. You know, nasty people, nasty people. I'm not a fan of exploiting, even if the person is a nasty person. What this seems to do is it stokes and fuels our own resentment, bitterness, and anger that initially can be very helpful to gain some footing so that you can reclaim your voice. But oftentimes people stay way too long in this place of extreme anger and bitterness and resentment and become really, really focused on monitoring how the other person is just nasty to the core. So this is not one of those videos where I want to reaffirm all of these extreme judgmental statements about how the other person is behaving. Because the truth is, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't really name how another person is behaving. But it appears to be that many other people seem to think that they can, which you have to be careful about so quickly getting on board with assigning these labels and these looking at these dynamics in such a way that are so extreme that in and of itself can skew your reality. And I'm assuming if you're even looking at a video about gaslighting, if you're even researching about what this means, that your sense of reality and having a strong, grounded sense of self is already a little fragile to begin with. So it can be helpful to take a break from the banging of the drum and the battle cry of just how nasty these other people are who have these personality disorders. And let's just label them, they're all like, these people are like this, and these people are like this, and these people are like this. Now, why am I sharing this? What is the lead up here? Is that I want to talk about gaslighting not so much to focus as an affirmation that someone has a personality disorder and is a horrible person and has been nasty, and all the reason why, we're trying to get into their head and how they're thinking. I don't want to focus on that. I want to use gaslighting as a platform or a launching off point, and I'm going to expand our understanding or the definition of it to think of it more in covert emotional terms of the impact that it has. And what that means is it's about denying our reality, receiving feedback where it denies our reality. But I want to focus on emotional interactions and interactions of body language and interactions of non-engagement that produce the same byproduct, the same consequence, the same outcome that gaslighting produces of someone who's very manipulative and purposefully trying to engage in abusive dynamics that really mess with your reality. So here's the thing. Let's think about in terms of a child and a parent. And let's say that your parent is not trying to gaslight you and that we cannot, we're not going to put your parent under the label of saying, and perhaps your parent was like this. So you'll have examples of definitely clear examples when your parent was coming from an abusive, manipulative, very calculating way, and maybe even subconsciously, but their behaviors and actions were so calculating that it really undermined your sense of reality. And then it would make you undermine your sense of trusting yourself and trusting your voice and what is true. And then, is the parent safe? Can I trust? And we enter the twilight zone when this happens. So I want to say, well, we have this clear behavior of gaslighting that's manipulative and abusive. Now, I want to take another example. Let's say, for all practical purposes, your parent is not that abusive, or your parent does not fall under the heading of gaslighting. But your parent avoids emotional truth and has an aversion to difficult feelings and has an aversion to emotional honesty. So let's just focus first on the parent with him or herself. So we know, many of us, it's very common as human beings, we do not want to feel our feelings because they're painful, or we don't want to feel our feelings when they're painful. So what we do is we shut down, we distract, we numb out, we self-medicate, we stay busy. We busy ourselves because we don't want to feel our despair. We don't want to feel our loneliness. We don't want to feel our embarrassment. Imagine you're in a family and the parent does something embarrassing. The parent doesn't want to reveal, not only feel it, let alone be in the center stage where there's other family members witnessing the parent experience his or her embarrassment. So the parent has an aversion to feeling his or her own feelings. Just push it away. Just push it away. Just avoid it. Just, sweep it under the rug. Just smile. Just smile all the time. Change the subject. Let's just change the subject. Or some parents just default to anger. So in our culture, especially for men, anger is the one emotion that has the most currency. And so if you're sad, you don't reveal that you're sad, you just get angry. If you're lonely, you don't reveal that you're lonely, you just lead from anger. If you're feeling anxious and distressed, you create an argument with someone. And instead of having to deal with your distress and your anxiety, you start arguing. And we use anger as this catch-all or this default to emotion. But besides the anger, the other, let's even just say sadness, really coming into grief and deep sadness. If you have a parent who does not value feeling his or her own feelings and has developed the psychological defense mechanisms to defend against, to have an aversion, to shut down, I am not going to feel that, the parent has an allegiance. The parent has this core rule, this belief. This could be a subconscious belief, but the approach is, I'm not going there. I'm not going to feel those feelings. So when the parent is with other family members, and very specifically with the child, if a feeling comes up for the child, let's say the child is sad, the parent is going to respond to the child with the same allegiance to their own core belief to avert and shut down and to deny and distract from being honest about the feeling that is here in the present moment. And so here then we would have a parent who might even in a knee-jerk reaction say, you're not sad. What are you sad about? There's nothing to be sad about here. That is emotional covert gaslighting. We can soften the word gaslighting because it means emotionally ignoring the child. The reason why I'm linking it to gaslighting is because I'm not focusing so much on the fact that the adult, that the parent is doing this. I want to focus on what does it do to the child's mind and the child's sense of reality when the parent is behaving in a way that is denying, shutting down, incongruent. The parent is responding in a way to ignore the child's emotional reality. And please forgive me. I said earlier I wasn't going to say this word, and I'm going to say it again. Well, I'll say screwed up. Instead of saying that version, I'll say screwed up. This screws up the child's reality. So if the child is lonely, the child's embarrassed, the child's sad, and then let's also introduce a range of sadness. We're not just, it's not a light switch. I'm sad, I'm not sad, I'm sad. It's a range on a scale of 0 to 10. Sometimes I'm sad at level 1, sometimes I'm sad at level 8. So let's say that the child has mild sadness, level 3, but the parent has this very rigid rule that says, we're not gonna acknowledge or feel sadness at all. And one reason, besides the fact that the parent has some core belief around this, is that a parent will perpetuate this imposing his or her reality onto the child's developing mind and the child's emotional self, because if the parent let in the emotional reality of the child, the parent would have to empathize and feel the child's sadness, which is going to be a bridge or a gateway and open up the parent to having to feel his own, her own sadness or embarrassment or loneliness or despair or anxiety or fear, whatever it is. We have a bunch of parents, particularly sometimes men, who have to give the impression that they're not afraid of anything. And so they work really hard to have this veneer like, I got this, I'm in control, I'm strong, I'm totally strong. So they're constantly denying the reality of their fear. And, essentially they're gaslighting themselves by trying to talk, say, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not afraid. I don't have fear. I don't feel lonely. No, I'm okay. I'm totally okay. And this self-incongruent, disconnected inner speak becomes the form and the style or the approach of parenting. And then it's very, very subtle. It doesn't have to be verbal, doesn't have to be direct. Let's say the child comes into the room and the child has a look of sadness on her face. The parent doesn't even pick it up. The parent totally ignores it. It might not even be conscious. The parent, it just doesn't register on the radar because the parent has trained him or herself, or he or she has been trained in when he or she was a child in their family growing up, to not have a sensitive radar system that's going to register, downturned mouth, looking down, heavy eyes, not appearing to be engaging. Something is going on. I'm picking it up on the radar system, the emotional radar, and then I'm going to say something. Honey, what's going on? Honey, you look sad. Are you, is everything okay? So a parent will be so immersed and ingrained in their own emotional disconnect that they will treat the child from the same place of emotional disconnect. And what does this do to the child? It produces the same consequence. It produces the same experience of gaslighting. This is emotional covert gaslighting. And what is that experience? The child is going to feel that their reality doesn't make sense. And the child has to talk themselves out of having a feeling and talk themselves out of having a need for comfort for their feeling. And sometimes they shame themselves for just having a feeling. So I have shame that I have a need to be sad. And now I have shame that I feel lonely when my family does not talk to me. But if I attempt to walk into a room or talk to family or engage in a way, my family, or in this example, say the parent, is not mirroring back any behavioral cues or verbal cues that would affirm the reality that says, hey, honey, you just look lonely. You look like you need a friend, and I wonder if you want to talk about that. Or imagine a parent who just immediately walks over and hugs the child and can speak to a reality and say, hey, I know what happened at school with the spelling bee and that you came in second place and you felt so embarrassed when you didn't spell that one word right. And so the parent is creating a container, a shared reality, I use the word container, to hold the emotional experience so it has a quality where has a completion, which means it's looping around, that everyone is on board. We're all joining in the same reality. What happens when a parent doesn't do that? What happens when a family, the family rule, the family culture, the family dysfunction is to perpetually ignore everyone's emotional needs and to ignore the reality that we're emotional beings and that we are going to repeatedly deny and repeatedly deflect and repeatedly avert and create a bunch of smoke and mirrors and distraction around naming reality. This makes us implode and shut down to our own emotional truth. And we take on, in the environment, the same way that the parent has an aversion to feeling his or her feelings, and the same way that the parent works very hard to deny and avoid emotions, the child also will disown his or her emotions. And we can play with language here and say, well, if the child is disowning his or her emotions, he or she is disowning a part of themselves. And so now I'm split. I have this split self. I'm disconnected. And this is the place where people implode and shut down. And it could be many, many years into adulthood. And let's, say you're 28 years old, you're 35 years old, and one day you realize, I don't really know what I feel. I don't feel my feelings. I can't cry. I can't access them. Because you were growing up in an environment where this covert emotional denying of feelings messed up the ability to acknowledge reality. You didn't have other people around you acknowledging your emotional reality, so therefore you were unable to acknowledge your own emotional reality. And this is the same byproduct. This is what happens in any kind of gaslighting situation, is where it really messes with and screws up our sense of reality. And so you could imagine being in your family system where now you have, multiple family members, mom, dad, or, if you're single parent home, whatever it is, doesn't matter the dynamic, but you're reinforcing emotional disconnect. And when you do this, you are continually confusing yourself. You're being trained to be confused about what is a shared emotional reality between two people. Now fast forward into your adult relationships and you wonder why you struggle in relationship. And you wonder why, you're two ships in the night that keep passing. And many people default to the word communication. They say, well, bad communication. We don't communicate properly. Well, partially what that means, that communication is a catch-all phrase, which means we're not able to read each other's emotional cues and validate each other's reality and stay contained together and allow each other to mirror back what we're feeling. And many of us can't do that for our partner because we haven't learned how to do it for ourselves, and we have been trained in a family of family members and parents who are not mirroring that back to us. This creates an incredible amount of discord and distress and a chronic ongoing feeling that something is wrong. And this is how we can link it to gaslighting. If you're in an abusive situation where someone is really purposefully trying to screw with reality and deny that you saw something, deny that something happened, deny that the partner said XYZ, and 2 weeks later you said, hey, remember that time you said XYZ? And your partner said, I didn't say that. What are you talking about? You're making that up. I didn't say that. So if you grew up in a situation where your family never acknowledged your own emotional reality, then chances are, as an adult, you are very challenged to mirror that in your partner because you can't mirror it for yourself. And what you're going to feel is like something is wrong, something is off. There's this chronic sense of, and back to the gaslighting idea, that you seem to, there still seems to be, like you haven't totally gone off on the deep end, or you just have not been able to totally shut down your rational, logical mind. Your intuitive self knows that something is not right here, but you just can't quite figure it out. It's like, this is not making sense. And that's how you feel growing up in your family when there is this emotional avoidance, this great emotional avoidance of shutting down another person's emotional feeling and not acknowledging, not mirroring, not attuning to what the child is feeling. This leaves the child with this very strange core feeling of emptiness and confusion that feels like something is off here. Something is really off here. And when you're in a relationship, let's say with someone who does know how to do this, if you're fortunate enough that you fall into a situation, it could be a partner, it could be a therapist, it could be a friend, and all of a sudden the person is acknowledging your emotions, that can feel wildly exposing. And that could even, because you have so much habituated, you have so much habituated history around being shut down emotionally, when it actually wakes up and there's this reciprocity and a shared containment of emotional attunement, you won't trust it. It's going to feel so exposing, and it also might feel delicious. You've been waiting your whole life for this, but very possibly what's going to happen is a flood of shame comes in, because what keeps this going is your parents shamed you for having an emotion, and they could have done this by just, a look in the eye, like they weren't even trying to do it. But you walk into the room. Think of this also like in terms of young boys with their fathers, and certain men are very particular, have very, very strong, rigid rules about, don't show sadness. And let's say this beautiful 10-year-old boy has some genuine, normal sadness, and he walks into the room and he can just see, and his dad's not even conscious of it, but dad makes a dismissive statement and maybe even snarls a little bit with a kind of disgust. Oh, you big baby. You big baby. And the dad doesn't even have to say it, and the dad doesn't even have to be conscious that he's thinking it. The child walks into the room. It's a beautiful 10-year-old with normal sadness and wants to share it with dad, wants some support, wants connection, wants emotional attunement. And the child, very quickly, it happens in a split second, it's a nanosecond, it happens, and the child picks up, dad has a look of disgust on his face. Don't be sad. We don't do that here. The child internalizes that, and not only is the feeling of disgust, the child is disgusting. And that's how we internalize shame. And the child believes, oh, there must be something wrong with me if I have this feeling. And I very clearly am not going to get dad's connection, warmth, support, love, or relationship. So I have to shut this part of me down to try to stay in relationship with a dad who already is not there for me. And this becomes this very vicious cycle. And it's this vicious cycle of emotional incongruence, emotional shutting down, emotionally denying our own feelings and then denying the feelings in others that we bring with us into our adult relationships. And we repeat it, and we're doing the same thing. And sometimes we can then say, well, we're the one doing the gaslighting. It might not be as extreme. It might not be like an abusive scenario. We might not be purposefully trying to be manipulative to make the person lose his or her mind. But we're so ingrained to disowning our own feelings that we are very much have a lot of rules and knee-jerk reactions around not letting our partner's feelings influence us. Because if they feel and we have empathy for their feeling, we have to wake up and feel our feelings too. And so this is how sometimes, see how this is so reciprocal, and how in a way we're also, many times we're the victim and the perpetrator at the same time. It's very confusing. And sometimes we're the ones who's simultaneously participating and perpetuating this emotional gaslighting, this covert emotional denying, shutting down of our partner's feelings, because we're just repeating what has always been done to us. This dynamic, everything I'm talking about, this is a really, I don't know if it's say it's the number one problem in relationship, but it's really up. I mean, this is a very common core reason that people struggle in relationships, because we struggle to be honest with ourselves and reveal that to another person, to be emotionally honest with ourselves and reveal it to a partner who knows how to receive it. And oftentimes we pick a partner who already came from a family where they too were shutting down emotional openness, emotional warmth, emotional attunement. And so now you have two people who pretty much came from similar environments where they're attempting to build a foundation of intimacy and emotional, through love. Love opens us up. But if we're going to be opened up, it brings with it our loneliness and our embarrassment and our sadness and our fear and our anxiety. And if we don't have practice, we need mature, sophisticated practice to contain and hold and mirror those feelings for our partner, which means at a fundamental level, we know how to do it for ourselves. And if we never had that, then our relationship's going to suffer and struggle. And many of us will feel like reality is being played with, and there's something wrong here. There's just something is off. There's something that's just off emotionally, and I keep feeling like I'm emotionally losing my footing. And it's very possible it's because you're engaging and repeating. We keep using the phrase, if this happened a lot in your family, we could call this a trauma, an emotional trauma. And we could say if it keeps playing out in your current adult relationships, you're looping in trauma reenactment. And it's that feeling like, I can't just put my finger, like, what is going on here? Why do I keep losing my footing? And then, emotionally imploding, and then feeling great disconnect. And then I have this wave of shame for, even having feelings. And then I shut down, and then I don't even know what to say. And then my partner walks away, and then my partner says, do you want macaroni and cheese? You're like, what? What are you talking about? Like, that doesn't do that. Like, no, we're not talking about dinner. And then we implode. It's very sad. It's very, very difficult. So this video, the ending here, thank you for listening, is to think about what exactly is gaslighting, and then apply it to not so much the form of a purposefully abusive, manipulative construct, but more as a response to avoiding emotions. And that when a parent does this within themselves, then if they're avoiding their own emotions, they're avoiding the child. And then the child is trained to do the same thing, but must first create their own disconnect and deny their own reality the same way that their parent is denying their reality. I hope that this was helpful. It's very painful stuff to talk about. Please leave a comment if you like this video. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel. More videos just like this on its way. And then to learn more about me, please, you can go to my website, which also has information about the community membership website that I'm creating. If you want to learn more about that, please go to my website, alanrobarge.com. Thank you for watching. More videos to come soon. See you next time.